Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guests, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about our conversations with our mothers, those relationships, those times that we have grown up, those times that we have said, oh, good Lord, what is going on? I'll never do it again. I don't want to do it the way they did it. Perhaps maybe you had a loving conversation, a loving upbringing. Others have said, oh, my goodness, it was like a bat out of you-know-where. Many times people will say, why did it happen to me? And they're afraid to tell their stories because they feel ashamed or they feel like they have guilt or whatever. I can honestly tell you, and we'll be talking about this today, is that many people who grew up in the 40s, 50s, and 60s have a very similar upbringing, very similar, because their parents and grandparents had gone through post-war, post-depression, and so many other difficult challenges, and all of a sudden they were going to start to learn how to read and write, and then the television came along. So history has really evolved in the changing of our relationships with our parents. Can we see that? Can we let them perhaps off the hook and say, I understand, I know what's going on, and I'm going to chart my own course, so to speak. My own course can be something different. It could be what I feel today, where I am today. So irregardless of how you were brought up, how you lived out your life, or where you are today, whatever's going on, you can always take a new breath and start anew. My guest today is Diane Danvers Simmons. Her book is My Mother Next Door. Diane, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Dr. Jeanette. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and you've already sparked many a thought in me with your intro to this particular conversation.
Yes, I think, Diane, you and I are of similar generation, so I think we can definitely say, oh, my goodness, we could almost go tit for tat and see which one, right? Exactly,
because what you say about our parents who, most of which had gone through the Second World War, or were children born after the war, very different experiences than parenthood today.
Yes. I said this on the show the other day. I said, if you look back at your grandparents, they were sent off to war, or even your parents, they were sent off to war, they were given a gun, they said, go kill people. And it was common. Yeah. And it was okay. Yeah. And then they came home and then they were beating the heck out of people around them because they knew violence, because violence was inbred in them and it was in society at that time. But now you look at the year 2025 and we go, oh my goodness, what is wrong? This isn't the way it's supposed to be. So humanity has really taken a huge leap in evolution, but yet you and I are still here. So our experiences from there to here, and everybody's expecting us to be roly-poly and jolly and happy. We're going, what the heck? How's that supposed to happen, right?
Right. And I think one of the things that you mention of what our parents, my parents were old enough to be my grandparents. So that's a whole nother story. Right. They saw a lot. But I think also within that, they were raised to do what was right for king and country, or, state and country, however you look at that. But I look at their stories, and it's very generational what we're dealing with. And we're the generation who have really crossed that threshold of what happened to our parents and the life they had and the rules around their life.
Right.
And now we're in this world where the rules and the feelings and parenting has totally changed. And some, rightly so, some maybe we need to be, question a bit more or tougher on ourselves. But I think, how we were raised, our mothers in particular, which is what my story is about, it does shape us as human beings. And as you say, we now are lucky enough to have the choice of what we are going to take from that and where we are today versus where we were back then. And even with my story, I couldn't have written my story in my, teens or 20s when it was happening to me. I can only write it now as we are open and willing to self-reflection, and self-reflection without judgment and giving those people a break, as you say.
Right. Because I think more people are sharing their stories. In other words, it's more acceptable. If we ever think about how things went on in our house, I mean, when I grew up, it was whatever happens in this house does not go outside the door. It didn't matter if they could hear you yelling and screaming down the block. It didn't matter. It still didn't go outside the door. And when you went outside the door, you were supposed to be this picture of epitome of perfection. And how dare you skew anything other than that? Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure, when I grew up, it was all about don't you dare talk. It was do not open your mouth.
Yeah. And I'm British, so it's even a level up from that. It was what happens in the family stays in the family.
Right.
And but also we were of a generation which in some respects, when I look at my story, saved me. My story, what was happening, wasn't plastered everywhere. I wasn't, social media wasn't around. All these outside noises weren't around to change my story, to amplify my story in a way that could be hurtful and detrimental to what was going on. Right. So again, it's this real, I think in, this story, as you say, about keeping things very personal, this is a story I never wanted to tell. I didn't want to go this deep and share this, but it was the story that I was destined to. Because every time I was in a room and I was involved in, speaking in front of young women in empowerment or spiritual awareness or, just the realities of spirituality and living in this world, or what we deal with in this world as women and the many phases we go to. And when women were stuck in a certain place, I would share part of my story, and every time it did, I found it helped someone. It helped them release something, or simply just look at things through a fresh lens, which is what I've tried to do, which is, why I've worked a lot with my own daughter in, creating workshops, or when we did our podcast, it was to have those intergenerational conversations so we can begin to see our stories from different ages and different phases. And because we're not this, single linear human being and human experience, we're multidimensional. And so many different things happen to us in different times of our lives, and we handle them differently.
Well, Diane, truly what it is you and I are what I call the bridge generation. In other words, we were between the two, but our purpose and our mission is merely to open doors. It is not to do anything else. It's not to fix. It's not to change. It's not to this or that or the other, whatever else you want to call it. We are only there to open doors. And when you open doors, you're sharing. That's all you're doing. You're just sharing. Whatever comes to you, you share it. Myself, I get all these things at night and I write them down. Don't ask me. They're philosophical or esoteric or whatever. I just sit down, I write them, I share them. That's my purpose. Yeah. Yours is to share this story. And we're sharing here on the radio. That's the purpose. It's to open the door. And once you open the door, just as when I work with patients at end of life, when I open the door, they're free to go. They're like, awesome, man. Get me the heck out of here,
Well, and I love that you say that we are the bridge generation, which I 100% agree. It simplifies what I was trying to say earlier, in fact, and opening the door. But that we're not here to fix it. What we are here to do is to have conversation so people can hear different points of view and then look at their own situation through, as I say, a fresh lens, a different point of view. Maybe even just giving people the freedom, the permission, let's say, to open the door to actually look at things in a different way that maybe they've wanted to hold on to because they think it makes them feel better. But it doesn't, to hold on to something because it's detrimental to yourself. I mean, it gets back to this issue of forgiveness is very important within this whole story. If you have had, you know, a story, upbringing where something's happened that hurts you, but it's to look at that, and what I've tried to do with the book and show people is we have to delve into someone else's story, particularly your ancestral stories, and understand our mother, understand their story, put ourselves in their shoe, because they're human beings too, and they have flaws, and, you know, they loved the way they loved us the way they could, whatever their capacity was at the time. And it isn't so much about us, it's about what their capacity was and their way of showing love, which is very different than our way of showing love now. I tell my children every single day, I love you, you're so important to me, and I want you to be good human beings. My mother couldn't use those words, I love you, until her deathbed.
Well, if you think about it, Diane, the things that they went through, I wouldn't say I loved you either to 90% of the people we encountered. You know?
No.
I mean, really, would you? I mean, I grew up in a life of tons of abuse and violence and everything, and it's like, are you serious? No way. I'm not. It doesn't even faze me. You know, it's sort of like that piece is just no. I'm not going to do that. You know, so a lot of people, when they want to be heard, they don't even understand what the word love means. And this is about unconditional love, not conditional. Right. We are talking about two totally different things. Conditional is what fills me up or what makes me whole inside or whatever that might be. And you share the story about your mother, you know, at the age of 16 of leaving, and then you turned around at the age of 16, she left you. I mean, patterns, you know, we think about that.
Yeah.
And she was like, hey, I did it, you can do it. See ya, bye. Yeah. You know, and I think about that all the time. And, I mean, I was pushed out the door, you know, too, so.
Yeah. I mean, my story is a little different because there wasn't violence or abuse, but it was a different type of neglection and abandonment, and there was narcissism that I never understood. But I think the stories, but, you know, I had to experience it because you're right. She did just walk out the door and left me to deal out with the fallout. She didn't even tell my father. I had to tell him. And that is a really impactful and life-changing moment in a 16-year-old's life when you go from being, you know, this kind of maybe a little bit of a princess, but used to a very bizarre family and interesting, as I always say, kind of, my mother was volatile, my father wasn't, but a very colorful family with, you know, it was a blended family, but definitely not blended because, you know, this sister didn't speak to this person. My mum didn't like my dad's daughter, you know, very complex. So I learned how to maneuver my way, navigate my way through that. But what I had to do was change that pattern. And when I stood at that crossroads of things aren't right here in my marriage, we need to deal with this, we need to face this, I did it in a totally different way, which my kids weren't the fallout from it. And it was very conscious. And my husband and I are together now, but we had separation for a while. But we did it in a way that didn't hurt my children. Yes, of course, it hurt. They didn't like us being apart, but it was discussed. We still had family dinners together, Sunday dinner together. We still did the holidays together. We talked about it. And that's where your point earlier of us being the bridge generation, our parents didn't give us that choice, didn't talk to us about that in a way that made us feel safe, or that we were important in the mix of this.
But if you think about it, Diane, back a long time ago, women were never important. They only had a job was to have kids and take care of the house. There was no importance. I can distinctly remember about getting a job if you're a woman. It's like, are you kidding me? I remember getting the first credit card, when the very first year that credit cards came out, women could get one, I got one. And I remember these times, and I think that's very different to have a conversation in reflection and look back at those times, yes?
Yes, and that's a really interesting point, because my mother left because she had raised 2 children and worked. Because if you think about it, women in the Second World War went to work because the men were all fighting. And then the war ended, the 50s hit, the 60s, and they're expected to be home and be silent again.
Right.
And so my mother was just born way before her time. And she had that taste of independence, running a business, loving that aspect of her life, raising children, but having family members there, her nieces, to help her raise her children. And then she marries my father, a very traditional man, who, when she wants to go back and just do a simple, it was to do with, I can't remember exactly what it was, but she wanted to go back to work, and he forbid it. Because he was a traditional man who believed he should be able to support his family, and no wife of his needed to work. That's where the dominoes began to fall. But I was lucky enough that he was also an incredibly, as you read in the book, supportive and loving father that wanted something different for me, but not for his own wife. Because there was a different, I suppose, there was pride if I went out and was successful, but there was shame if his wife had to go out and work.
Diane, as a medium and a shaman, I sit back and I listen to you, and I read your book, and I think about your mother, and it came so clearly to me that your mother was way ahead of her time, that she pretty much was I would call an awakened soul a long time ago. She knew exactly what her position was, what she was supposed to do, and she continued to expand on her own self. It was very clear.
Yes.
It's just that she was ahead of her time, and that wasn't then. So then, by you coming along, she knew she was supposed to bring you into this world at that time, and then she was supposed to marry along, and you could take care of yourself because you were going to be the next one to be able to do the next step. So I think a lot of times, I have shared on the story, I said about our soul is really just this ball of glitter, and it intersects with an ancestral lineage out in the universe, and we don this human story, this human wetsuit. And then all of a sudden, all this ancestral stuff comes to us, and we have to read it and follow it. But yet, when we are now these awakened souls, we are in reverse. We are shedding these ancestral lineages. We no longer are attached to them and those tether lines. So in essence, your mother had already known that. And then now you're just bringing this forth.
Yeah. I actually say in my book, and I've always said this, I had to be born to my mother, or I chose to be born to my mother, to really toughen me up for the human experience, the real world, but to enlighten me that others would find very conflicting, because my mother was that person who told me when I was a little girl, that a gypsy had told her in Ireland that she would have a child very late in life, and it would be very important to bring that child into the world.
Right.
And she was also the woman that would, pull out dream books when I had a dream. She would see things.
She was ahead of her time.
She used to call herself a witch.
Yes.
Because she said...
Right. Because she was a knower. She was a knower is what they call them.
She was. And you think about it, she was 45 when she got pregnant with me. Now, in 1960, people weren't having babies at 45.
Right.
But she'd lost 2 children. She'd had to, she had been through a lot. And I found such a new admiration and respect for my mother in writing this book. There were things I will never forget and chose never to repeat. But there were things that she taught me, and the fact she brought me into the world at that point of her life is really quite incredible. And she and my father, because they were both, my father was a widower, my mother had divorced her husband, who had been abusive, it turns out. But she knew she needed to bring me into the world, and she would always share these, speak to this astrologist, look at this medium, She always encouraged that in me. So that's where people sometimes find it very, very important. And even when I was writing this book, I have some friends, and then actually I'll jump back a second. When I was writing this book, before I wrote this book, my daughter and I are very, very close. I have a totally different relationship with my daughter than my mother and I. And she was at college. It was when my husband and I were going through a hard time, and she felt anger about that, and I could tell that. So I thought, you know what, we're going to go out of the country. I'm going to take her somewhere totally different for a totally different experience. This is a very important bonding time. She's 17. She's 18, just turning 18. Really important time for us as women, because she's becoming a woman herself. And she's angry at me. And so we went to Morocco. And the first night at this, we're at a wellness retreat. And the first night, I got very, very sick. And I was violently sick 13 times in a row. And the next morning, I'm with some of the group. And there was this lady called Lisa. I said, I'm so sorry for the noise I made and that I kept you awake. And she laughed. She said, well, I thought it was a horror movie, but that's fine. She said, you needed to purge yourself to move on to the next chapter. And she said, look at you. There is a softness and a readiness now. So I thought about it and thought, this is interesting. Remained open. That night at dinner, after dinner, other people left, and I'm there with her and her husband and 2 other women, and she looks at me and she said, you have to forgive your mother. And I said, what do you mean I have to forgive my mother? You don't even know me. You don't even, I forgave my mother years ago. What do you know about my story? And she said, you have to forgive your mother, otherwise your daughter will carry the burden. And right now she is. You have to change the pattern. And in sharing your story, you'll become a mirror for other women. You will help other women. Turned out she was a medium. Her husband was a medium. It was one of those moments of time where something strikes you. It hits you so hard. And it's like, she's right, I have to do this. But through the writing the book, friends of mine who are mediums actually said there is a woman, an older woman, and she's saying she's sorry, but you do need, she's okay. You need to share this story. She's okay about you sharing this story.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because you know what? She's not there anymore. So in other words, the job is done. Do you get it? You've cut the ancestral line. She's not there anymore. No,
you are so right. You are so right. And I never thought about that point Dr. Jeanette, of she's not there anymore. She doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
And it is the ancestral part of it is not something I understood when I started writing the book, but it became so clear by the time I finished.
Yeah. You know, for myself, my father had passed recently, and it didn't even raise a hair on my body. It was just okay, you know. And even still, I don't see him, feel him, or sense him because I was complete with him, you know, a long time ago, and I had already, you know, completed with that ancestral part of that, and I was done, and it was okay. And even to this day, it's just okay. You know, and so many people can't understand that. I think you truly have to process it and be in a different space and time to understand it. But once you do, it's sort of like it really shifts your world, you know. I wanted to touch on this one thing, Diane. You had said in the book about your mother, and you said maybe it was just that she was a Gemini, about the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows. And I think of that myself because I'm a Gemini. And people say to me all the time, oh, you have to go out and get grounded. I said, honey, I am not grounded to anything. I live in the world, and I fly all the time. And I can just see, potentially your mother probably would have said something like that, right?
You know, it's funny. I write in the book, my father was the foundation, the grounding, and my mother is the person who gave me the wings to fly.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? I mean, that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. You talk about death. When my father died, I was 23. I was devastated. It was so hard. He was my anchor. But when my mother died when I was 45, and I actually had gone to see a therapist at that time, which had helped me accept that what she did and the way she handled it was wrong, and I didn't have to cover for her anymore. When she died, when I was 45, I went to see her before she died, and we spoke a lot, and she was lucid, and then she was in this other world. I'm sure she was seeing people who had died before her and speaking to them and saying hello to them. They were waiting for her. But I had exactly the same. When my mother died, I was traveling. I came back to England. I did her eulogy, and I walked away, and it was, this is fine. I didn't have that sense of loss either. It was like there was an absolute completion at that time until I had to come back to it for my daughter and future generations' sake.
Yeah, when you're completed with it, it's just done. And I think you just say, okay, next. And what do you work on next, you know? And I think that's how you phase through things.
Yeah, it is. And I think when our parents die, it's like, okay, we're the matriarch, whatever the title is, whatever the role is. But we take on that role. It is different. But it's our mothers or that's where our story begins on this earth. It begins with them. That's our first relationship. That's our first understanding of what love is.
But also, too, I think the idea, Diane, is that when you start looking at relationships, you really get stuck in the ownership of the identity. They're my mother, my daughter, my this, my that ownership thing. And when I did all the work on all of the relationships that I needed to and progressed through it, I took away I took away the ownership and looked at them as a separate individual within their own soul and story. And once you take away that ownership and you start dissolving those cords, it makes a world of difference in how you engage in the world, because no longer are you ownership of anything. It's not my house, my car, my body, my this, my that, whatever. You look at it as a separate entity, and it really... it takes away all this idea of control or fix or shame or guilt or any of those identifiers you want to put on it, right?
Right. And, I think that's such a good point because we need to do that with our own children.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
Yes.
People want to own their children, control their children. And my mother tried to control me for a while and realized she couldn't. But with our adult children, the way I look at it or try and say to people is our job is to raise them to be the best human beings possible. Give them the tools, the skill sets, whatever we can. But ultimately, it's up to them to become the person they need to become, to live the life they want to live, because they have, aspects of us, but they're their own individual being. We are not meant to control them or own them in any way. And that letting go is so important. And I think if you can look at your own parent, which I tried to do in this book, it's really looking at her and the workshop that my daughter and I created afterwards. It was looking at our mothers as women, as individuals who had lives before us, while they were raising us, and had dreams and lives after we were working and out in the world on our own. Mm-hmm. So that also is, they're individuals in their own right. They're here trying to deal with whatever they're dealing with in this world, wherever they've come back to this world. And we all have a reason to come back to this world. And I learned early on with one spiritualist, and I didn't understand it at first, but was to trust. And I thought it was to trust other people, but I realized it was to trust myself, and to trust what I needed to do, share how to live my life, and trust my own voice in that. And my mother did that. She actually, she's the one that gave me the courage to write the story, because she, whether rightly or wrongly, she had the courage to leave. So she could, because she would have, just withered away, died in that relationship. It was not the right relationship for her.
Well, I really see it is that she was done with the relationship. In other words, she did what the relationship had to birth forward. It was you. She brought you to the point where she knew the marker was at 16, and she said, "Thank you for the time. You're like you were a co-pilot with her. Thank you for the time. It's now time for us to leave." And it's okay. I think the difference is that when you get stuck in it and you're not okay with it, you're either okay or you're not okay with it. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, I've got 4 adult children, and let me tell you, each one of them is so diversely different, and they're nothing like me at all, but they have strings attached or similar to me. It's almost, I liken it to the idea is that when they're born, you give them a spool of thread, and then they take that thread, but they find the other threads to be able to weave their own tapestry of their own life. And for every child that was born, I always give them a blanket. And the answer is, it's a soft place to land. If you need it, I'm here, but I'm a soft place to land. Other than that, go fly, go do whatever. And every single one of them, one's had a tremendously difficult life. Another one's had another difficult life. Another one's had a different kind of life. Another one's like, their life is imperfection. But everybody has been totally different. And even, it's funny, just the other day, I had texted one of the kids, and I had said, are the kids okay? And they texted me back, and they said, that's kind of weird to ask. And I'm going, no, I was just wondering if they were sick. And they said, well, maybe you should ask if they're sick instead of asking if they're okay. And I'm going, what? And I'm going, am I on a starship or something, or what is the communication? Do you know what I'm saying? So we truly have to really let things go anymore, because the generations behind us are so vitally different that truly it's almost better for us to go off. And I always say, when I set my feet down to the thing, in the morning I'll say, I'm still here. And at night I'll say, fairies, are you ready? We're going to just hold hands and walk into the sunset kind of idea. I'm ready, you know. It's the idea is that I can't be attached to all that anymore. It's just whatever, you know. It's like whatever, right?
Yeah, and I think you're right. Every child is different. Every child needs something different from us. But I do love that analogy of the strings, the cords that bind us, but the soft landing of the blanket, because we are. I mean, that's what I always say. You know, you can say anything to me, you can tell me anything, and I promise you, I'm not going to be shocked, and I will hear you. And I think that's one of the things when I look at it, is just being heard by so many people and allowing our to have that safe space they can come where they know they're unconditionally loved and they can be heard. And, you know, I think it's interesting you mentioned the ownership piece, because when I think about it, my mother did a very good job of making me feel like, even though it was really hard, and it was the hardest thing was happened to be the go-between and all these different fractions of the family fighting and throwing opinions about what they felt about stuff. I, in some weird way, I felt like an observer through the time.
Correct.
Understanding that she was trying to finally live her life again. And as you mentioned, the fact she left Ireland at 16 to come to England on her own. She felt that was the age, as you say, where your job is done. Right. Her job is done. Time to move on. Which is why I get back to this. If someone has got an issue about a parent, look back. Understand their story. Dive into it. Because that's the only way you're going to break any cycle or any pattern. Unless, you know, because no one's life is perfect. I mean, all of our stories are messy. There's painful parts. There's unexpected parts. There's comical parts. And the other thing, I think that some of these experiences we have early on, the hard ones, they do build resilience. And we do need resilience in the world. It's just a fact. But it doesn't mean we have to lose our humanity and our heart and our love and the way we want to interact with people.
But you also said about being an observer, and I can distinctly remember there were several instances, and I mean, I don't, probably hundreds of them, but I can distinctly remember standing in the corner and just radiating light. I don't know why I was like, I was probably not in my body. Maybe I was out of my body. I don't know. But I was observing the violence, and I was just standing there and observing. It didn't hit me. It didn't twinge on me. It didn't anything. I was just an observer. And I think that's so vitally important to understand that, as I call us, the bridge people, we were only meant to observe. So a lot of people who have had a lot of lives, like perhaps maybe I have, they'll say, oh, but it was terrible. It was this, that, and the other. I said, yes. You know, one time someone said to me, oh, I'm so sorry for your suffering. And I said, what do you mean? And I had to look up the word suffering on Google to see what it meant. I didn't know what it meant. This is in my 50s. Yeah. Because I said, I've only had experiences. I'm not suffering. I'm not dragging the bag up my butt, all these collections to get pity from people. I'm not interested in that. I'm sharing my story with you because it's sharing my experience. If you feel like I'm suffering, then you must have something that you have issues with this. It has nothing to do with me, right?
Right. And I like that you brought that up because I never felt like I suffered. I never felt like a victim. I just felt I was in this rather complicated situation.
That's it, yeah.
And it just, but it is what made me the woman I am today. It gave me drive. It gave me, it taught me things. I experienced so much, and it's, you know, I could sit in a boardroom, because I have been in the corporate world, with, you know, 18 men and feel perfectly confident and able to speak my truth and say what I needed to say, because I did have a mother who spoke her mind. I did have a mother who, you know, when she felt this wasn't right, left. And who taught me to never allow someone to tell me no without understanding it, without really delving down into why was this? What do I want? What do I need as well? So this need for victimhood, which is really raised its ugly head, I think, in this present culture, it's like a way people feel they're getting attention, and it's the worst type of attention, and it's not helping anyone. And you know, you probably heard this too as a kid. No use crying over spilt milk, Diane. Just move on. And it was so true. But again, I get back to, we didn't have this glorified social media, which people share every emotion without even being conscious of it or thinking about why they're doing it. Are they doing it because they care?
Thank goodness we didn't have social media when you and I were growing up, because we would have had pictures and stuff out there that we might have been would be glad are not out there, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that's my point. It's like, you know, people are willing to throw stuff out there too quickly without being conscious of, you're just manifesting this more and more and more, because it's not actually helping anyone. You know, share it for the right reasons. Don't share it, get attention. And for me, it was, you know, writing the book and this experience was incredibly cathartic and very expansive. But also, it gave my own children and family a chance to look into stories and my upbringing that they didn't know about. And so it helped them see things in a different perspective too. So it's like a triple effect. And I think one of the wonderful things in writing the book was when not just not the letters or the emails I got from women, which were really powerful and really helpful, women who said, oh my God, I got home and my mother was gone and left us and I didn't know how to deal with it. I'm so happy to hear someone's writing a story about this and that I'm not alone.
Right.
But
that's true.
Which was so important. But it was the women who wrote to me, which was the biggest surprise, who said, I had to get out of my relationship and leave my husband because it was abusive, or whatever the reason was. And I wanted to take my children. I'm not able to take my children. I hope my kids can forgive me or understand my story the way you've understood your mother's.
Right. Yeah.
And that was really so profound to me, and it gave the book purpose. You know, I only wanted to write the book if it had purpose and meaning. And to know that it reached the women who had been left and the women who left, that was very powerful to me. That it was like it's all worthwhile. But books take a long time, as you probably know.
Right. In closing, Diane, I truly see your mother as living a life without filters. I know for myself, my kids will always say, be careful with my mother, whatever comes out of her mouth, she has no filter. You know, you're going to get what you're going to get. But what it truly is that our soul and our spirit is speaking. And that's where people are very confused. They believe that it's our humanness that's making that or saying that or doing that or whatever it is. And it's not. It's our soul and our spirit that's speaking. Yet they're very confused, and they get stuck in that because then they translate it into whatever menage they want it to be. So the idea is that, just as your mother may have shared things, she was sharing it. It was coming full force as the energy of the moment. And to understand that, you say, oh, got it. Got it.
Yeah.
All there has to be is a got it. There doesn't have to be anything else. And once you say that, it's like you're kind of like just go, oh, okay. Just like when I had gotten that text, it was like, oh, okay, got it. I guess I should have said. Yeah. I should have said, "Are they sick?" Instead of "Are they okay?" So, okay, got it.
Well,
next time I'll use the other word. So, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit like the podcast I did with my daughter. It was called Mothers and Daughters Unfiltered, and that's my website, and all my articles go on there.
Right.
And it is, because it is unfiltered, and as long as people understand, there is a difference between unfiltered and cruelty, and intention to hurt versus pure blatant honesty. And generation skip. My daughter is unfiltered, like my mother was, but she knows if she says something and it comes out the wrong way and someone is hurt, she has the courage and the awareness to then go and speak to someone about it, or apologize if it's come out too harshly, or explain why. Right. So it is interesting. The soul and the spirit is unfiltered. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever. It's zero filters, and even when I do my writing, I sit down and I'll write things like in the middle of the night on the phone, not even knowing what I'm writing, and I'll go back and I'll look at it and I'll say, "Oh, you might need to edit it," and I'm going, I will never edit it. Even if there's something missing, I will never touch it, because once I touch it, it no longer is the same. And I think that's very important. Yeah. I keep a journal by my bed and do the same, or my phone on notes. I'll suddenly get this thought driving along, and I'll pull over and I'll just speak into the phone. I have no idea necessarily what it is, but I know I'm kind of this vessel or whatever's speaking to me at that moment, whether it's soul, spirit, angels. Just let it come through. It's our unfiltered self coming through.
Yeah, our unfiltered. Yeah. The unconscious to some, but it is conscious. And it's. I just said. I was thinking. You mentioned fairies earlier as well. My mother used to talk about the fairies all the time, because she grew up in Ireland with the fairy rings. Yeah. So truly believed in those. But there are so many things that are unknown to us, or why, but that's where we are the observers, and where we observe, and it's how we handle them, how we move forward with them.
And I think to be open to whatever comes up to you. I know for myself, I'll just share this quickly and then we'll end, but is that I've always seen ghosts and angels my entire life. It's always been that way. That's why, and I've had so many, people call them near-death experiences. I said there's no such thing. You actually do die, and you actually do come back. It's up to you to come back. So, and I can tell you about all of those. So then the idea is, you said about the fairies in Ireland, and, I'm of Irish descent, and when I see the pictures of myself and the two fairies, it's always green, and we're going into this forest, which means Ireland to me. But I think the idea is that be free and open to what does come up along with your experience of doing this. Be very conscious, because those are your abilities. Your ability, your clairvoyance, your clairaudience, your clairsentience. These are all of your abilities that are coming through. Your mother had a full array of, she was probably totally open her whole life. She probably, if you had asked her, did you see ghosts and angels, she'd probably tell you yes, tell you their names, tell you what they were wearing. And so the idea is that she was an expanded person already in another dimension. So if you can really hone into that and say, isn't that awesome? and take those bits and pieces and say, it's now time for me to turn this one on or turn that one on, then you really become that multidimensional person in this time.
Yes. And she did give me those gifts, which I definitely had as a child. Right. They were stunted in my 20s when a lot of this was going on, but then they came back. So with my own children, with me and my own children. So it's part of the ancestral development, which is a really good part, and that we've all been given the freedom to be open to that, where a lot of people aren't given that freedom. I was given that freedom, and my children have too, been given that freedom in turn.
Right. Well, it's absolutely awesome to speak with you today, Diane. Can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Jeanette. First of all, it's been such an enlightening and wonderful conversation, so thank you for that. Enjoyed it thoroughly. And I hope anyone listening, even though there's one little nugget out of that, it's wonderful. My book is called My Mother Next Door, and you can find out more about it on my website, which is called Mothers and Daughters Unfiltered. And on that website, there is my book. There is also 2 years of podcasts between my daughter and myself, articles written by both of us, and a lot of media on the book. There is articles that were written afterwards, as well as, any press, other podcasts, etc. And I'm also painting again. So I have another website called Diane Danvers Simmons Art. And that's been very interesting because it's been the evolution and development since the book. And again, something my mother really encouraged me on. I am on Instagram and Facebook, but mainly Instagram under Diane Danvers Simmons and Mothers, Daughters Unfiltered.
Very good. Well, Diane, it was a pleasure to have you with us here today. I think a lot of people will say, oof, I found something that I'm able to say it. It's opened my door. Perhaps it maybe pushed me outside the door, and isn't that awesome, right?
That would be awesome. Just open that door, as you say. Open the door. Thanks so much, Dr. Jeanette.
Thank you.
And thank you.
If you'd like to find out more information about Diane Danvers Simmons, again, the book is My Mother Next Door. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to her website for more information. And if you truly are feeling like this is just like blowing your mind and you're saying, oh, no way, there's no way I could actually make a shift in my life. Perhaps maybe I just want to share my story, or maybe I just need someone to talk to. Please do check out the link on the bottom of today's show page for my links, and we'll be able to have that conversation. It's about opening awareness and observation and saying, what is really out there? There's so much more possibilities in life. Diane and I have both shared our stories, and you can definitely find all the gifts from your life. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.